However, if you're a parent or you love somebody, we are called into prayer about the people we love, their lives. One day I will shake the hand of the spouses of my children if they're to be married. And if at the age of that marriage they are 28 or older, I will say to the person I shake the hand of, I have prayed for you for 28 years, and it will be the truth. Because someone taught me to pray for my children when they were born about every aspect of their life that will come up. Can you imagine what that person is going to think? They'll think I'm nuts. That was an example I chose to follow. Someone taught me that practice of faith. And I try to live by that to the best of my ability. In our readings today, we first encounter in the Old Testament this promise given to Abram, who becomes Abraham. And Abraham does not understand that someday his descendants will be as numerous as the stars. He looks up and it must be confusing. I think we still don't understand things in the world around us today, but how we react becomes critical to our life of faith when we're in a place where we cannot understand something. And then in the Psalm 27, it's all about what should I fear? Why should I fear? I will have no fear. Because fear does bad things to us in the way we react. And then the epistle in Philippians talks about the way a community should act and behave. A community should follow Christ, not try to kill him. And all of these things come together nicely in the lesson from Luke, which is a story about Jesus getting ready to enter into Jerusalem very soon. And in this story, the trip Jesus is referring to is going to be started on Palm Sunday and go into Holy Week. So Jesus encounters some Pharisees, and they say to Jesus, "Get out of here. Herod is going to kill you." Now, I'm a bit confused because the Pharisees are typically the bad guys in most of our stories in the Bible. And so I wonder, why do they want Jesus gone? And so I apply the principle of perhaps they fear what will happen in their city if Jesus is killed here. Perhaps they fear a conscience, because certainly the Pharisees have already been discussing, how do we neutralize this guy named Jesus? How do we plot and scheme to get rid of him? For his message and his words and his actions are causing all of us trouble in the church. And so I think it's some kind of fear that is driving this Pharisee to want to get rid of Jesus. And today I believe that as we, as individuals, encounter fear, it's not so unreasonable to think we too want to tell Jesus to move on. Get out of here. When we're having a conflict in school, if you're a student, we want to figure out how to get rid of that which is hurting us. Instead of finding a way to solve it, it's easier to just wash our hands and move it on. If we're at work, we're employed, and we have something we do not understand or we can't possibly figure out a way, it's better just to push it away, push it on, get rid of it. I think Jesus responds to this fear by proudly proclaiming, "Tell Herod, I got work to do. I'll be here today, tomorrow, and the next day." In a sense, Jesus is saying, your fear and your attempt to push me on and move me out is no good. That is a worldly value. That is a worldly reaction. And as God pertains to the world doesn't dictate to God how God will act and behave. And so Jesus says, tell him I'll be here for the next 3 days doing my thing. And then I'll move on to Jerusalem. Jerusalem brings up another factor. It's a community factor. It's a larger picture. And Jerusalem is known by the reputation of stoning and killing the prophets, of stoning and killing those who bring good news and a message of God. And so Jesus identifies that that community over there is known for killing, is known for driving away, is known for rejecting. I think as communities, be that community a family or a church or a nation, we as communities, we still have reputations to reject a message that is not one that is of our narrative or our story. To reject things that challenge us to go beyond our understanding. Dare I say, even to kill the messenger. The person who brings into our community a new message of peace and hope which scares us, and we want it dead because it doesn't fit our culture. Jesus responds to this threat of death not by running away, but by running into, going in the midst of. Jesus clearly knows what Jerusalem's reputation is, and in fact says it's impossible for a prophet to be killed outside of Jerusalem. So we know Jesus knows he is headed for his own death. And he does this because of this great desire he has for Jerusalem. He talks about it when he uses the mother hen, desires to gather her brood under her wings for protection and safety. But then says, Jerusalem, you have rejected this. You do not want it. The message we learn today is, once again, God's plan is not responsive to humanity's understanding of rejection, to humanity's lack of desire to hear the message of good news. God doesn't play that game. God goes into that game. I remember a professor, his name was Brad Benow in seminary, and he was a baseball fan, and he used to love to use this analogy with us. He used to talk about the short hop in baseball. If any of you have ever played baseball or softball, this applies. You can't back off a short hop, or it's going to handcuff you, hit you in the elbow, bounce off your chest, hit you in the chin. But the hard thing to do is to play the short hop the correct way, which is to charge it, to go straight at it. And so when that hot hopper comes to you, you charge. You go into it. That is exactly what Jesus does. He goes into a community. He goes into Jerusalem. He goes into that place where he wants to gather and bring together because he has a plan. And he knows his death is inevitable. I wonder if we have seen in our culture, our day, our time, people who remind us of rejecting society's value, of fighting personal fear and what that means, and heading straight into the short hop. I wonder if Martin Luther King would be someone like that. There sure was a lot of fear in society ideas about what it meant to be black back then. And I don't think he responded to fear, and I certainly think he went into that fear. Many people may not know he reflected upon his own death the day before. He reflected on it multiple times as he wrote letters from jail cells. He knew his life would be taken from him somewhere down the road. He sure is a good modern-day example of a prophet who battled fear and went into the heart of misunderstanding, the heart of people that wanted to kill him. There are still things around us today that produce these responses. Perhaps it's ISIS and ISIL and world terror. Perhaps it's homosexuality or poverty or addiction. Maybe it's even the present political climate, which seems to have a lot of fear associated with it and cultural values about what politics are or are not. I can't give you an answer for all of those examples, but what I can tell you is God doesn't respond to our fear as individual, and God doesn't avoid the short hop, so to speak, or the painful parts that lie ahead. God still, to this day, enters into our fear, will not be pushed away by us. No matter how afraid you are of something or someone, you cannot solve it by pushing them away, and you certainly cannot solve it by pushing God away. And in our culture, we will solve nothing by eliminating the principles of grace, love, and peace, or by eliminating entire races, cultures, and populations of people. Jesus does not respond to our fear and to our cultural norms and ideas. Jesus enters into them. And that is the huge blessing. Jesus desired to gather in Jerusalem like this hen, and does it. Does it through death. Does it through the cross. Does it through his resurrection. We are allowed to still struggle in our fear, and as culture to still battle these things. We are allowed all those things, and we need to remember God's promise of being gathered is not affected by our failure and our fear and our opinions and our attitudes. Not at all. Because Jesus went into Jerusalem and gathered not only Jerusalem but the world on the cross, we too have been gathered into that beautiful, beautiful gift. So this might be a good week to just think a little bit to yourself. How do I operate when I'm afraid? And how does our culture have a reputation to reject and push away the good news of our modern day prophets, like Martin Luther King or like Jesus? That is something good to think about this week. And remember, we have already been gathered into the cross and have been given the hope of the resurrection. Amen.
In my trial